Toxic people can't stand when you do this. There comes a point in your life when you stop explaining yourself, and that's when toxic people start losing their power over you. They thrive on your reactions, your need to justify, defend, and be understood. But the moment you stop feeding their confusion with explanations, you become unpredictable to them. Your silence becomes your strength. You no longer chase understanding from people committed to misunderstanding you. You choose peace over proving your point. That calm detachment, that quiet confidence, is something they can't stand. It's the moment they realize they can't control what they can't trigger. Then comes the power of setting boundaries without guilt. For so long, you might have said, yes, when your heart screamed, no. You tolerated too much, excused too often, and gave energy that was never returned. But when you finally draw the line, when you say, this is not acceptable anymore, something shifts. You no longer apologize for protecting your peace. Boundaries aren't punishment, they're clarity. Toxic people despise them because boundaries remind them they're no longer entitled to your energy. They can't stand to see you protect yourself because it reveals how much they used to take advantage of you. And when you start staying calm instead of reacting, they crumble. Toxic people feed off your emotional chaos. They want your tears, your anger, your explosion, because that's how they stay in control. But when you stop reacting and start observing, when you choose calm over conflict, they lose access to your emotions. Your peace exposes their dysfunction. Your stillness irritates their need for drama. They don't know what to do with your composure. The calmer you become, the more uncomfortable they get. Because peace is something they can't manipulate. Another thing they can't stand is your growth without their approval. The moment you start healing, growing, and evolving, without needing their validation, they feel powerless. They mock your progress. They try to downplay your success. They twist your transformation into arrogance. But deep down, they're terrified, because your growth reflects everything they refuse to become. Every step forward you take reminds them of the limitations they chose to live in. And that's why they'll try to hold you back. Not because you've changed too much, but because you've finally outgrown them. And finally, nothing drives a toxic person more insane than when you walk away with dignity. They expect chaos. They want to see you beg, cry, or lose yourself. But when you leave quietly, no shouting, no drama, no emotional display, it destroys them. Because silence can't be argued with. They can't twist a goodbye that has no words. Your calm exit becomes the most powerful statement of all. You didn't lose control, you regained it. You didn't walk away to prove a point, you walked away to protect your peace. Toxic people can't stand when you stop giving them what they crave. Your energy, your reaction, your validation. When you finally choose yourself, they realize their power over you was always an illusion. The truth is, peace irritates those who live in chaos. Growth exposes those who refuse to change. And silence terrifies those who built their power through manipulation. So keep being calm, keep growing, keep protecting your peace. You owe no one an explanation for your healing. The more you evolve, the less they'll understand you. And that's exactly how it should be. When you stop explaining yourself, the power that silences toxic people, there's a quiet strength that begins to rise inside you. When you stop explaining yourself to people who are not interested in understanding you, it's the moment you realize that your peace is far more valuable than someone's opinion of you. Toxic people feed on your explanations, every justification, every defense, every attempt to make them see your heart. But when you finally stop explaining yourself, you cut off the energy that sustains their control. You begin to recognize that not everyone deserves access to your thoughts, your reasons, or your intentions. You owe clarity only to yourself and peace to your soul. Toxic people can't stand it when you stop explaining because confusion is their weapon. They twist your words, manipulate your intentions, and use your openness as ammunition against you. They don't listen to understand. They listen to respond, to distort, to turn your vulnerability into leverage. When you stop explaining, you take back that power. You no longer play their game. You let silence become your response, and that silence unsettles them deeply. They can't attack what they can't define. They can't twist what you never said. The very calmness that once seemed weak becomes your unbreakable armor. You see, people who constantly demand explanations are not always seeking truth. They're seeking control. They want you to justify your boundaries, your emotions, and even your healing. They want you to feel guilty for protecting yourself. But there comes a point when you realize that no amount of explaining will ever satisfy a person committed to misunderstanding you. You can pour your heart out, express your reasons gently, and still be painted as cold, distant, or selfish. And that's when the truth becomes painfully clear. Their problem was never your lack of explanation. It was your decision to honor yourself. When you stop explaining, something powerful happens inside you. You start conserving emotional energy. You begin to move from reaction to reflection. You realize that you don't need to defend your worth, because your worth doesn't decrease when others fail to see it. You no longer chase validation from people who can't value what you bring. The peace that follows is not loud or showy. It's quiet, steady, and liberating. You feel yourself returning home, to stillness, to strength, to the person you were before you were made to doubt yourself. Toxic people can't stand this new version of you. They can't stand the silence. They can't stand that they no longer get access to your explanations, your emotions, or your inner world. They'll call you cold, changed, or arrogant. But that's just projection. They're not angry because you changed. They're angry because they can no longer control you through emotional dialogue. The peace that comes with detachment threatens their need for chaos. The self-assurance that comes with silence exposes their insecurity. They'll do everything to provoke a reaction, but when you refuse to give one, their power dissolves. When you stop explaining yourself, you also begin to attract peace into your life. The conversations you engage in become more intentional. The people you spend time with value understanding over argument. You start realizing that real connections don't require explanations. They require alignment. The people meant for you won't make you feel guilty for protecting your peace. They won't twist your silence into arrogance or your distance into disrespect. They'll understand that self-respect sometimes sounds like no, and that silence sometimes means healing. It takes courage to stop explaining, especially when you've been conditioned to please. Many of us were taught that being kind means always being available, always being understood, always clarifying our intentions. But that's not kindness, that's self-erasure. Kindness without boundaries becomes exhaustion. When you stop explaining, you're not being rude. You're being real. You're acknowledging that your energy is not infinite, that your peace deserves preservation, and that not every question deserves an answer. Walking away from unnecessary explanations doesn't mean you stop communicating. It means you communicate with intention. It means you save your words for people who listen with empathy, not judgment. You stop performing emotional labor for those who refuse to do their own healing. You stop carrying the burden of proving your goodness to those who thrive on misunderstanding it. Silence is not avoidance. It's emotional clarity. It's the understanding that your peace of mind matters more than winning an argument. And here's what happens next as you practice this kind of calm detachment. Your life becomes lighter. You start to see how much energy you used to waste trying to convince others to see your truth. You start noticing that peace feels better than being right. You learn that not responding is often the most powerful response. The people who genuinely care will meet you in your calm, not drag you back into chaos. The rest will simply fade away, not because you push them out, but because your peace no longer entertains their noise. So stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided who you are. Stop trying to make toxic people understand your side. They don't want understanding, they want control. Let your silence be your statement. Let your boundaries speak louder than your words. Every time you refuse to over-explain, you reclaim a piece of your power. Every time you choose calm over conflict, you heal a part of yourself that once needed to be understood. The truth doesn't need defending. It stands firm on its own. And the more you embody that truth, the less you'll need to say. When you stop explaining yourself, you rise above manipulation. You learn that peace doesn't need to shout, and dignity doesn't beg to be seen. Toxic people can't stand that, because your silence reminds them that they never had control, only access. Now, you've taken that access back, and that is how you win, quietly, gracefully, completely. When you set boundaries without guilt, the art of choosing peace over pleasing, there comes a time in your life when you finally understand that peace isn't something you stumble upon. It's something you create through boundaries. The moment you decide that your emotional safety matters as much as everyone else's comfort, everything changes. Setting boundaries isn't about building walls. It's about creating clarity. It's about recognizing what drains you, what restores you, and what you simply will no longer tolerate. Toxic people can't stand when you set boundaries because it removes the control they once had over you. They used to feed on your guilt, your people-pleasing, your inability to say no. But when you learn to say no with calm conviction, they begin to see that their access to your peace is no longer guaranteed. For so long, you might have believed that setting boundaries made you selfish or unkind. You were taught that saying, yes, made you good, that self-sacrifice made you loving. You said, yes, even when your soul was screaming, no. You tolerated disrespect, endured manipulation, and carried emotional weight that wasn't yours to bear. All because you didn't want to disappoint anyone. But here's the truth. Constantly betraying yourself to please others doesn't make you kind. It makes you exhausted. It disconnects you from your own needs, your own values, your own truth. The moment you start setting boundaries without guilt, you stop abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. Toxic people hate boundaries because they expose entitlement. They've built a dynamic where your compliance sustains their comfort. When you begin to say no or demand respect, they panic, not because you're wrong, but because you're rewriting the rules. Boundaries reveal who respects you and who is simply using you. The people who truly care about you will adapt, adjust, and honor your limits. The ones who only valued your silence, your compliance, or your constant availability will call you difficult, selfish, or cold. But don't let their labels shake your truth. The discomfort they feel is simply the consequence of no longer having unlimited access to your energy. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others. It's about protecting yourself. It's about choosing emotional clarity over confusion. It's about refusing to be the person who always gives, fixes, explains, and forgives at the cost of your own well-being. You start realizing that you can't pour from an empty cup, and you're no longer ashamed to refill it. Boundaries don't mean you love less. They mean you've learned to love smarter. You've learned that your kindness should be guided by wisdom, not by guilt. And once you truly understand that, you stop feeling bad for saying no to things that don't serve your growth. When you set boundaries without guilt, something powerful begins to shift inside you. You stop reacting to emotional manipulation. You recognize when someone's guilt-tripping is actually a test of your strength. You learn that it's okay if people get upset, that their reaction doesn't mean you're wrong. You stop apologizing for existing in your full self-respect. You start walking through life with quiet authority. Not loud, not defensive, just steady, grounded, peaceful. You no longer explain your boundaries. You embody them. You no longer beg for understanding. You lead with clarity. And in that calmness, you find freedom. People who are used to your compliance will resist your boundaries. They'll say things like, "You've changed," or "You're not the same anymore." But that's not a problem. That's proof. You're no longer living to be understood by those who benefit from misunderstanding you. You've stopped shrinking yourself to fit the emotional needs of those unwilling to meet you halfway. The guilt that once consumed you starts to fade, replaced by something stronger, self-respect. You begin to see that protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. You stop trying to explain your no and start standing firmly in it. Boundaries don't have to come with explanations. They don't require anger, just consistency. It's not about shutting people out. It's about letting the right people in. Those who truly care will adjust. They'll learn your limits, not test them. They'll understand that your peace is not a threat. It's an invitation to a healthier connection. And those who don't, those who feel entitled to your time, your attention, or your forgiveness, will drift away. Let them. Because when you finally honor your boundaries, you stop chasing relationships that require you to betray yourself. You'll start noticing how much lighter life feels when you stop trying to manage everyone's emotions. You'll begin to see that the world doesn't fall apart when you say no. In fact, it becomes more aligned. You realize that real peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of self-respect. And every time you stand firm in your boundaries, you teach others how to treat you. You show them that your love has structure, your time has value, and your heart is not a playground for inconsistency. Yes, at first it's uncomfortable. You'll feel guilt creeping in, the old urge to explain, to soften your no. But remember, guilt is not a sign that you're doing something wrong, it's a sign that you're doing something new. You're unlearning a lifetime of self-abandonment. Every time you honor your boundaries, the guilt gets quieter and your peace gets louder. One day, you'll look back and realize that the people who truly mattered never made you feel bad for protecting yourself. Setting boundaries without guilt is an act of love, not against others, but for yourself. It's saying, I will no longer give what empties me. It's choosing authenticity over approval. It's understanding that peace is not something others can give you. It's something you protect within yourself. Toxic people can't stand that level of self-awareness because it exposes their dependence on your lack of it. But that's not your problem. It's their mirror. You don't have to fix them. You just have to keep choosing you, and that's the real power. Walking through life knowing that you can love deeply without losing yourself, care for others without carrying their chaos, and give generously without draining your soul. Setting boundaries without guilt is not selfish. It's spiritual maturity. It's you finally saying, my peace matters too. And that's something no toxic person can ever take from you again. When you stay calm instead of reacting, the power that shatters toxic control. There is a strength that doesn't shout, doesn't fight, doesn't rush to prove itself. It simply remains still. That strength is calmness. When you stay calm instead of reacting, especially around toxic people, you're not being passive, you're being powerful. Because toxic people crave reaction. They survive on your emotional chaos, your frustration, your need to defend yourself. Every time you react, you feed their control. But when you stay calm, when you refuse to give them the storm they're hoping for, you reclaim your peace. You show them that their drama no longer lives rent-free in your mind. And that realization terrifies them. Calmness is not weakness, it's emotional mastery. It's the ability to stand in the middle of someone's chaos and not let it touch your inner stillness. Toxic people can't handle that because your composure exposes their instability. They want you to argue, to scream, to break, because that's how they measure power. But when you respond with calmness, they lose their weapon. They can no longer manipulate your emotions when you've mastered the art of not reacting. Your silence, your steady voice, your peaceful energy, it all becomes unsettling to those who only understand conflict. You see, reaction is their invitation. They throw chaos your way to see if you'll accept it. The insults, the mind games, the guilt trips, all of it is bait. And for a long time, maybe you took the bait. You explained yourself, defended your heart, tried to prove your intentions. You argued your way into exhaustion. But nothing ever changed, did it? Because they weren't listening to understand you. They were listening to control the narrative. The moment you realized that your calm is more powerful than their chaos, the entire dynamic shifted. Suddenly, their words had less weight. Their energy stopped dictating your mood. You began to understand that you can't control them, but you can always control yourself. Staying calm doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. It means you choose not to match their dysfunction. It's knowing you can walk away from what doesn't serve your peace without explaining your exit. It's refusing to let someone else's noise drown out your inner voice. Calmness isn't silence born from fear. It's silence born from strength. It's the confidence of knowing that not every attack deserves a defense. It's the understanding that peace is a response to, and sometimes, it's the loudest one. When you remain calm, you start seeing things clearly. You begin to notice patterns that were hidden when you were reactive. You see how some people provoke arguments just to feel important. You see how they twist your reactions to make you look unstable. But when you stop reacting, they lose that narrative. They're left standing in their own chaos, exposed, frustrated, powerless. And you remain grounded. You become untouchable in a world full of emotional triggers. There is deep wisdom in restraint. It's knowing that peace doesn't mean avoiding conflict. It means not letting conflict consume you. Calm people are not detached, they are focused. They understand that reacting to every insult, every opinion, every lie is like giving away pieces of your power. Toxic people hate calmness because it reminds them that they can't control you anymore. Your stillness becomes their mirror. It reflects everything they lack. The more peaceful you become, the more uncomfortable they get, because chaos cannot survive in the presence of calm. When you stay calm, you start to see that not everything needs your energy. You learn that silence doesn't mean defeat, it means discernment. You begin to choose peace over proving your point, understanding over being right, solitude over fake connection. You stop needing to have the last word. You stop needing closure from people who thrive on confusion. You realize that your calm isn't for them, it's for you. It's your shield, your sanctuary, your power. Of course, choosing calmness is not easy. The ego wants to fight back, to defend, to prove. But peace whispers, you don't have to. Every time you choose calmness, you rewire your emotional patterns. You begin healing the part of you that once believed reaction was survival. You learn that not reacting doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care more about your inner peace than about external validation. It's not indifference, it's maturity. It's choosing to rise above rather than sink to their level. Toxic people will call your calmness cold. They'll say you've become distant or emotionless. But what they're really saying is, you no longer react the way we want you to. Your peace disrupts their power. Your composure confuses their control. Your silence speaks louder than any argument could. And that's why calmness is one of the strongest forms of self-defense. It keeps your dignity intact while their behavior exposes itself. There's a quiet victory in walking away from chaos without losing your balance. It's in refusing to argue with someone who only wants to drain you. It's in realizing that you don't have to attend every battle you're invited to. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Because when you stop reacting, they start unraveling. They can't fight what doesn't fight back. They can't argue with peace. And over time, this calmness becomes your lifestyle. You stop engaging with toxicity, not because you're avoiding confrontation, but because you've learned that not all battles deserve your energy. You choose to protect your emotional space like it's sacred, because it is. You start living on a higher frequency, one where peace is your default and composure is your language. People may not understand it, but that's okay. Calm souls are rarely understood by chaotic minds. So, stay calm. Let others be loud, reactive, dramatic. That's their story. Yours is written in quiet strength. Every time you choose peace over reaction, you heal a piece of yourself that once lived in survival mode. You become lighter, freer, wiser, and that's the ultimate power, not controlling others, but mastering yourself. Because the person who stays calm in chaos is the person no one can control. And toxic people, they can't stand that. They never could. When you keep growing without their approval, the freedom that terrifies toxic people, there's a moment in your journey when growth becomes your only option. When you no longer shrink to fit places you've outgrown. When you stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. And that moment, that quiet evolution, is exactly what toxic people can't stand. Because your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your progress exposes their complacency. The version of you they once controlled, doubted, or underestimated no longer exists. And that unsettles them deeply. When you keep growing without their approval, you become proof that validation was never the source of your power. Courage was. Toxic people hate your growth because it means you've detached from their influence. They used to define your worth through criticism, manipulation, and subtle control. They fed your insecurities to keep you small. But growth changes everything. You stop seeking permission to evolve. You start realizing that their comfort is not your responsibility. The dreams they mocked, the confidence they tried to destroy, the healing they dismissed, all begin to flourish without their approval. And nothing threatens a toxic person more than the sight of someone they couldn't break becoming stronger than ever. Growth is not always loud. Sometimes it looks like you withdrawing quietly to heal, setting new goals in silence, moving differently, thinking deeper, and loving yourself without apology. Toxic people don't notice it at first. They just sense something slipping away. The old you, the one who used to chase their acceptance, is gone. They'll try to guilt you for changing, accuse you of being distant, or call you selfish. But what they're really saying is, I can't reach you anymore, because growth lifts you to a frequency they can't manipulate. When you keep growing, you begin to understand that approval is a cage, one designed to keep you limited. You use to measure your value through other people's comfort with your success. But growth teaches you that approval is temporary, and authenticity is eternal. You start making decisions that align with your soul, not with their expectations. You stop waiting for applause and start celebrating yourself. You realize that people who truly love you will grow with you, not against you. They will cheer for your evolution, not compete with it. But those who only liked you when you were insecure will turn resentful when you become confident. Toxic people can't stand your growth because it highlights their refusal to grow. You start becoming everything they told you you'd never be. You're calmer, wiser, more focused. You no longer entertain gossip drama or validation games. You've stopped reacting and started reflecting. Your growth makes them uncomfortable because it exposes their own stagnation. And deep down, they know it. They may criticize you, belittle your goals, or dismiss your peace as arrogance, but those are just defense mechanisms. They're not angry because you've changed. They're angry because you've outgrown their chaos. Your growth threatens them because it represents freedom, and toxic people can't stand freedom in others when they still live in emotional captivity. They thrive on control, and your independence breaks that cycle. You begin to think for yourself, act for yourself, choose for yourself. You stop being predictable. You start saying no, not out of defiance, but out of clarity. You start walking away, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. And that's when they realize they no longer have power over you. You've evolved beyond their reach. When you grow without their approval, something magical happens inside you. You stop explaining your journey. You stop feeling guilty for your boundaries. You stop apologizing for choosing peace over people who bring pain. You start aligning with purpose, and the right people begin to appear. Those who see your light and don't feel threatened by it. The more you evolve, the more you attract authenticity. The fake falls away naturally, because growth doesn't just elevate you, it filters your environment. Toxic people will often try to re-enter your life once they see you thriving. They'll say they've changed, or they'll act nostalgic, reminding you of how things used to be. But growth gives you clarity. You see their patterns clearly now. You understand that not everyone deserves access to the new version of you. You've learned that some people can only love you when you're small because your growth demands accountability they're not ready to face. You don't have to hate them. You don't even have to confront them. Your silence, your distance, and your continued progress are enough. The beauty of growing without approval is that you finally experience freedom. You no longer fear outgrowing people, places, or versions of yourself. You realize that evolution is not betrayal. It's alignment. You're not abandoning others, you're returning to yourself. You start trusting the process, knowing that every season of your life is preparing you for a higher purpose. Growth teaches you to be at peace with being misunderstood, because not everyone is meant to understand the path they've never walked. And while toxic people can't stand your growth, you eventually reach a point where you no longer care. Not out of bitterness, but out of serenity. Their opinions stop echoing in your mind. Their energy no longer lingers in your spirit. You've made peace with letting go. You've learned that sometimes silence is the strongest statement, distance is the deepest respect, and growth is the sweetest revenge. You stop proving your worth and start living it. You stop performing healing and start embodying it. Growth is rebellion against everything that once tried to limit you. It's you choosing yourself, again and again, even when others don't understand. It's you walking through life with grace, no longer needing validation to feel valuable. It's knowing that the people who truly love you will never fear your evolution. They'll evolve beside you. And the ones who can't handle it will simply fade away because your energy no longer matches their frequency. So keep growing, quietly, unapologetically, without seeking approval, without looking back. Let your peace speak louder than their judgment. Let your transformation tell the story you no longer have to explain. Because the moment you keep growing without their approval is the moment you finally become untouchable. And that's what toxic people fear most. Your freedom, your clarity, your light. Because when you keep growing, they can no longer reach you. And that's the most beautiful kind of power there is. When you walk away with dignity. The silence that ends every battle. There is a kind of power that doesn't roar, doesn't threaten, and doesn't seek revenge. It's the quiet power of walking away with dignity. It's the moment you realize that not every situation deserves your reaction, not every person deserves an explanation, and not every battle needs to be fought. Walking away doesn't mean you've lost, it means you've finally decided that peace is more valuable than proving your point. Toxic people can't stand that. They want chaos, not closure. They expect shouting, arguments, and drama. But when you leave quietly, calmly, without giving them what they crave, you win a war they'll never understand. Walking away with dignity is not weakness, it's self-mastery. It's when you choose silence over chaos, composure over confrontation, and healing over hostility. It's understanding that you don't have to participate in every conflict just because someone invites you to it. You learn to let them talk, let them twist, let them misunderstand, because you finally see that your peace doesn't require their validation. The old version of you might have begged to be understood, to be heard, to prove your heart. But the healed version of you knows that peace begins when explanation ends. You stop chasing closure and start creating it within yourself. Toxic people hate when you walk away with dignity because they lose the one thing they need: your reaction. They built their control through emotional chaos. Every argument, every guilt trip, every dramatic scene was designed to pull you back in. But when you refuse to engage, you expose their weakness. They can't manipulate silence. They can't twist what you don't say. Your calm becomes their mirror, reflecting the chaos they tried to hide behind control. That's why your quiet exit hurts more than your anger ever could. When you walk away with dignity, you are not running, you are releasing. You're letting go of a cycle that no longer serves you. You're no longer interested in being right. You're interested in being free. You realize that walking away is not about giving up. It's about growing up. It's choosing maturity over reaction, truth over illusion, and self-respect over approval. You don't slam doors, you simply close them gently and never look back. You stop needing to prove that you were the better person, because your peace already proves it. There's beauty in restraint, in the ability to remain silent while chaos screams for your attention. Walking away with dignity is the ultimate test of self-control. It's knowing you could destroy them with words, but choosing not to. It's having the strength to say nothing when your silence says everything. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that the truth doesn't need defending. It stands steady on its own. You don't walk away to teach them a lesson. You walk away because you've already learned yours. Toxic people thrive on attention, and your withdrawal starves their ego. They'll call you cold, accuse you of being heartless, or say you never cared. But that's just noise. They're projecting the emptiness they feel now that they can't feed on your energy. Don't fall for it. Let them talk. Let them paint whatever version of you they need to feel better. You no longer need to participate in their narrative. Your silence is the end of their script. When you walk away with dignity, you stop playing the role they cast you in. And that's what breaks their control completely. The strength to walk away doesn't come overnight. It's born from countless moments of disrespect, disappointment, and emotional fatigue. It's the exhaustion of explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. It's the realization that no amount of love can fix someone who doesn't want to heal. You reach a point where you stop begging for effort, attention, or honesty. You stop negotiating your worth. You simply decide enough. And that decision, though quiet, is the loudest thing you'll ever say. There's a peace that follows the storm of walking away. At first, it feels strange, empty, even. But soon, that emptiness becomes space. Space for healing, for clarity, for growth. You start sleeping better, thinking clearer, breathing deeper. You start remembering who you were before you had to defend yourself all the time. You realize that peace isn't found in fixing broken situations. It's found in removing yourself from them. And in that peace, you rediscover your strength. You remember that walking away was not an act of weakness. It was an act of self-love. Toxic people can't stand that. They expected your breakdown, not your breakthrough. They expected drama, not dignity. They wanted the fight, not the silence. But silence is your power now, not because you're avoiding confrontation, but because you've mastered self-control. You don't need revenge, because peace is your closure. You don't need validation, because truth is your companion. And you don't need their apology, because you've already forgiven yourself for staying too long. When you walk away with dignity, you rise above the noise. You stop needing to be understood by people who were never listening. You start understanding yourself more deeply than ever. You realize that peace doesn't always come with answers. Sometimes it comes with distance. You see that the end of something toxic isn't loss. It's liberation. It's the universe saying, "You've learned what you needed. Now go where your soul feels safe." You don't owe anyone an explanation for your peace. You don't owe them access just because they once had it. You can love people from afar, wish them well, and still never let them near you again. That's not bitterness. That's maturity. It's the realization that your energy is sacred, your boundaries are valid, and your silence is strength. You walk away not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring for yourself. So, walk away when your peace costs too much. Walk away when you've explained yourself enough. Walk away when staying means betraying your soul. Do it with grace, do it quietly, do it with your head held high. Because dignity isn't about proving your worth, it's about honoring it. And one day, you'll look back and realize that your silence was never empty. It was full of power. Your calm exit was your final statement. And that's what toxic people will never understand. They lost the battle the moment you decided not to fight.